The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Federation stretched beyond what most species could comprehend. Crystalline walls pulsed with alien energy, and the air itself seemed to hum with the power of 1,000 civilizations. At the center of this magnificent hall stood the most feared being in known space, Vexthara the Dominion, a cosmic overlord whose very presence made planets tremble. Vexthara towered 15 feet above the polished floor, his obsidian skin crackling with purple lightning that danced across his muscular frame. 6 eyes glowed like dying stars, each one capable of seeing through dimensions. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of collapsed galaxies and the fury of supernovas. For 3,000 years he had conquered worlds, enslaved species, and bent the universe to his will. Today, the Federation's most powerful leaders had gathered to witness something unprecedented. Representatives from the Zephyrian Empire, the Silicon Collective, and the Ethereal Dominions filled the massive chamber. Each delegation brought their finest warriors, their most brilliant minds, and their deadliest weapons. They had come to negotiate the surrender of humanity's last stronghold, but instead of Earth's greatest generals or most decorated admirals, the humans had sent a girl. She couldn't have been more than 20 Earth years old. Her brown hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she wore simple clothes that looked like they belonged in a university library rather than a cosmic battlefield. No armor gleamed on her small frame. No weapons hung at her side. She carried nothing but a worn leather satchel and a calm expression that seemed wildly out of place. Vexthara's laughter echoed through the chamber like thunder rolling across mountain peaks. The sound made several alien dignitaries step backward, their various forms of breathing apparatus working overtime to keep them conscious. Even the artificial intelligences present registered the vibrations as potentially harmful. This is what humanity offers. Vexthara's voice boomed, each word dripping with contempt. A child? A weak, pathetic little creature who looks like she would break in a gentle breeze. His 6 eyes fixed on her, each gaze carrying enough psychic pressure to crush most minds. I have reduced entire armadas to cosmic dust. I have made emperors weep before my throne. And Earth sends me ... The girl stood perfectly still. She didn't flinch when Vexthara's psychic aura washed over her. She didn't retreat when his lightning crackled closer. She simply looked up at him with dark eyes that held something the Overlord couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. My name is Sarah Chun, she said quietly, her voice somehow carrying clearly through the vast chamber despite its softness. And I'm here to discuss terms. More laughter erupted from Vexthara, and this time other council members joined in. The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline form chimed with musical mockery. The Silicon Collective's drones buzzed with electronic amusement. Even the usually stoic ethereal representatives rippled with what passed for humor among their species. Terms? Vexthara leaned down, bringing his massive head closer to Sarah. Energy crackled between his horns, and the smell of ozone filled the air. Child, I don't negotiate with insects. I step on them. Your species has exactly one choice: complete submission or total annihilation. Those are your terms. Sarah reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, unremarkable device. It looked like nothing more than an old communication unit, scarred and weathered from use. Several council members actually groaned at the sight of such primitive technology. Before we discuss anything, Sarah said, her voice still maddeningly calm, I need to show you something. It's a recording from one of our exploration vessels. The ship was called the Wandering Star. Vexthara's eyes narrowed. He had never heard of any human vessel by that name, which was impossible. His intelligence networks monitored every human ship that left their solar system. Every human transmission was intercepted and decoded. Every human secret was laid bare before his analysis teams. Play your little recording, he said dismissively. Let us see what pathetic plea for mercy your species has prepared. Sarah activated the device and suddenly the chamber filled with sound. But it wasn't the desperate begging Vexthara expected. It wasn't even human voices. The sounds that emerged were unlike anything the assembled beings had ever heard, a complex mixture of howls, growls, and otherworldly harmonies that seemed to bypass the ears entirely and speak directly to something primal in the brain. Several council members immediately stepped back. The ethereal representatives began to glow with agitation. Even Vexthara felt something stir in the deepest parts of his consciousness, something that had been sleeping for millennia. "What is this noise?" he demanded, but his voice had lost some of its commanding thunder. "It's not noise," Sarah replied, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she smiled. "It's language. Specifically, it's the hunting song of the Fenris Pack from the Outer Dark. You know, the region of space that even your fleets won't enter. The place where ships go missing and are never found again." The recording continued, and the alien sounds grew more complex, more haunting. They spoke of ancient hunts across the void, of prey that tried to run but could never hide, of pack bonds that transcended space and time itself. Most disturbing of all, they spoke of intelligence, vast alien intelligence that had been watching and waiting for the right moment to act. Vexthara's confident expression began to crack. The Outer Dark was indeed Forbidden's territory, a region his scouts had marked as impossibly dangerous. No expedition that ventured there ever returned. Even his most powerful sensors couldn't penetrate whatever strange forces dwelt in that cosmic wilderness. "The Wandering Star spent 3 years in the Outer Dark," Sarah continued conversationally. "They made contact with beings your empire has never even imagined. And they learned things. Wonderful, terrible things." The recording shifted, and suddenly there was a human voice mixed in with the alien sounds. Captain Rebecca Torres, speaking in perfect, fluent Fenris. Her words painted pictures of alliance, of understanding, of a partnership that transcended species barriers. "Impossible," Vexthara whispered, but the word carried no conviction. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the recording ended. Vexthara's 6 eyes darted between Sarah and the now quiet device, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. The implications were staggering. If humans had truly made contact with the beings from the Outer Dark, everything changed. "You're lying," Vexthara said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "No species has ever communicated with those ... things. They're monsters. Cosmic aberrations that exist only to destroy." Sarah tilted her head slightly, studying the massive overlord with those unsettling calm eyes. "That's what everyone thinks. It's what we thought too at first." Captain Torres and her crew went into the Outer Dark expecting to find either empty space or death. Instead, they found a family. She reached into her satchel again and produced a series of data crystals that gleamed with an inner light. No Federation technology could replicate. The assembled council members leaned forward despite themselves, drawn by the alien beauty of the objects. "These contain the complete linguistic matrices," Sarah explained, setting the crystals on the central podium. "The Fenris Pack doesn't communicate the way we do. Their language isn't just sound, it's emotion, memory, genetic history, and quantum entanglement all wrapped together. Learning to speak it changes you at the molecular level." The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline form chimed with nervous energy. "That's impossible. Language is mere symbolic representation. It cannot alter physical matter." Sarah smiled again, and this time there was something predatory in the expression. "You're thinking like a civilization that's never left its own galactic neighborhood. The beings in the Outer Dark have been traveling between dimensions for millions of years. To them, the distinction between thought and reality is fluid." Vexthara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. He had built his empire on the principle of overwhelming force, on being the biggest predator in any room. But now, standing before this small human girl, he was beginning to understand that there might be things in the universe that made his power look like a child's tantrum. "Even if this is true," he said slowly, "what does it matter? Your species is still weak. You still have no great fleets, no planet-crushing weapons. You're still just humans." "It's just humans," Sarah repeated thoughtfully. "You know, Captain Torres said something similar when she first met the Pack Alpha. She was terrified, convinced they were going to tear her crew apart. Instead, the Alpha asked her why she smelled like loneliness. The girl began to pace slowly around the podium, her footsteps echoing softly in the vast chamber. Every eye followed her movement, drawn by something magnetic in her presence. The Fenris Pack understands something that most civilizations never grasp, Sarah continued. They know that true strength isn't about size or firepower. It's about connection, about belonging to something larger than yourself. They've been alone in the outer dark for eons, and they recognize that same loneliness in humanity. Vexthara's claws extended unconsciously, scraping against the crystalline floor. Get to the point, child. What do you want? I want you to understand what you're really facing, Sarah replied. You see humans as weak because we don't conquer worlds or enslave species. You think our small size and gentle nature make us prey? But you're missing something crucial. She stopped pacing and looked directly at Vexthara, and for a moment her human appearance seemed to flicker. The assembled council members blinked in confusion, certain they had seen something else standing there, something with silver eyes and too many teeth. The Fenris Pack doesn't adopt just anyone, Sarah said, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. They're incredibly selective. In their entire history, they've only accepted 7 species into their family. Each one had to prove something special, something unique that the pack valued above all else. The Silicon Collective's drones began to emit high-pitched whines of distress. Their sensors were detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist, quantum fluctuations that suggested reality was becoming unstable in Sarah's immediate vicinity. What did humanity prove? Vexthara demanded, though part of him no longer wanted to know the answer. Loyalty, Sarah said simply. Absolute, unbreakable loyalty. When the pack tested us, when they put our people in impossible situations and watched how we responded, we never abandoned each other, not once. Not even when it would have been easier, safer, more logical to cut our losses and run. She gestured to the data crystals, which had begun to glow more brightly. The pack language isn't just communication, it's a bond. When you speak it properly, you become part of something vast and ancient. Your pack becomes your family, and their strength becomes yours. Vexthara felt his confidence crumbling like a star collapsing into a black hole. The implications of what Sarah was describing were beyond terrifying. If humans had somehow bonded with the mysterious entities from the outer dark, if they had access to that incomprehensible power— You're bluffing, he said desperately. Even if all of this is true, you're still just one girl. You can't threaten me or my empire with stories and pretty crystals. Sarah's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than they had been moments before. Who said anything about threats? I'm not here to fight you, Vexthara. I'm here to offer you something much more valuable than conquest. The Overlord's 6 eyes narrowed. What? A chance to learn? Sarah replied. A chance to understand what real strength looks like. The pack has been watching your empire for centuries, studying your methods, your motivations, your fears. They find you ... interesting. She picked up one of the data crystals, and it pulsed with warm light at her touch. They're willing to teach you, just as they taught us. But first, you have to prove you're worthy of their attention. And how exactly would I do that? Vexthara asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's eyes gleamed with an inner light that definitely wasn't human. By listening to what I'm about to tell you in the true tongue. By hearing the words that will change everything you think you know about power. About family, about what it means to be truly strong. She opened her mouth to speak. And the sound that emerged was nothing like human language. It was the voice of the void itself, ancient and wild and utterly alien. But somehow, impossibly, Vexthara understood every word. The words that flowed from Sarah's lips were unlike anything the council chamber had ever witnessed. They weren't just sounds, but living things that crawled through the air and burrowed into the minds of everyone present. The language of the Fenris Pack carried the weight of cosmic time, the hunger of endless voids and the fierce joy of the eternal hunt. But more than that, it carried truth. Vexthara staggered backward as the alien words hit him like physical blows. Each syllable revealed secrets about himself that he had never acknowledged, fears he had buried so deep that he had forgotten they existed. The language stripped away his carefully constructed image of invincible power and exposed the terrified child who had once cowered in the ruins of his homeworld. The pack speech told him about loneliness, the crushing, endless isolation that came from being the strongest being in any room. It spoke of the hollow victory that followed each conquest, the way triumph turned to ash when there was no one to share it with. Most devastating of all, it revealed the truth he had spent 3 millennia running from, that all his power meant nothing without connection, without belonging, without pack dot around the chamber. Other council members were experiencing their own revelations. The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline form flickered as the pack speech revealed the deep melancholy that lay beneath their species' musical communication. The Silicon Collective's drones spiraled in confused patterns as their logic circuits struggled to process concepts that transcended pure reason. Sarah's voice rose and fell, like a cosmic wind, painting pictures of vast hunts across the galaxy's edge. She spoke of prey that ran not because it was afraid, but because the chase itself was a form of worship. She described the moment when pursuer and pursued became one, when the distinction between hunter and hunted dissolved into something greater than either could achieve alone. "Stop!" Vexthara gasped, but his voice was weak, broken. The pack speech was changing him, rewriting the fundamental codes that made him who he was. He could feel his consciousness expanding, touching something vast and alien that waited in the spaces between stars. But Sarah didn't stop. Her words became more complex, weaving together concepts that no single mind should have been able to hold simultaneously. She spoke of humanity's journey into the outer dark, of Captain Torres and her crew learning to see past their own species' limitations. The pack speech revealed how humans had first encountered the Fenris entities. It wasn't the glorious first contact that Federation historians would record. It was messy, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. The human explorers had been lost, their ship damaged and their supplies running low. They had stumbled into pack territory not as conquerors or diplomats, but as children seeking shelter from a storm they couldn't understand, and the pack, ancient beyond measure and wise in ways that transcended normal understanding, had seen something in these small, fragile beings that resonated across species barriers. They had seen creatures who, despite their individual weakness, would risk everything for each other. Who would face impossible odds rather than abandon their packmates? Who understood, without being taught, that some bonds were worth more than life itself? The pack speech told of tests. Not the brutal trials that Vexthara's empire used to measure worth, but something far more profound. The Fenris entities had presented the human crew with choices that revealed their deepest nature. Again and again, they had chosen sacrifice over safety, unity over individual survival. Sarah's voice began to change as she spoke, taking on harmonics that shouldn't have been possible for a human throat. The assembled council members watched in fascination and terror as her appearance flickered between forms. Sometimes she looked like the young woman who had entered the chamber. Sometimes she appeared to be something else entirely, something with silver fur and eyes. Like burning stars, the pack speech explained this transformation too. When a being truly learned the language of the outer dark, they became something new. Not human and not Fenris, but a bridge between worlds. They retained their original nature while gaining access to powers and perspectives that spanned dimensions. "This is what you're truly facing," Sarah said, though her words now carried the weight of a dozen voices speaking in perfect harmony. Not conquest, not war, not the clash of empires. You're facing the possibility of evolution, the chance to become something greater than what you are. Vexthara felt his legs give out beneath him. The great Overlord, terror of 1,000 worlds, collapsed to his knees as the full implications of Sarah's words crashed over him. Everything he had built, everything he had fought for, suddenly seemed small and meaningless compared to what she was offering. "The pack doesn't want to destroy your empire," Sarah continued, her form now shifting continuously between human and something else. "They find your methods crude and your motivations limited, but they recognize potential in you. The same potential they saw in humanity. The data crystals on the podium began to resonate with her words, their inner light growing brighter with each syllable. The light wasn't harsh or blinding, instead it felt warm, welcoming, like the glow of a campfire in an endless night. "But potential means nothing without choice," Sarah said, her voice now barely recognizable as human. "The pack won't force evolution on anyone. They've learned over millions of years that true strength can only come from within. You have to want to change. You have to be willing to give up everything you think makes you powerful in order to discover what actually does." She gestured toward the crystals, and Vexthara realized that they contained more than just linguistic matrices. They held doorways, pathways to understanding that would fundamentally alter anyone who walked through them. "The choice is yours." "Vexthara," Sarah said, her words echoing with the patience of geological time. "You can continue as you are, ruling through fear and force until entropy claims your empire like all the others before it. Or you can take the first step toward joining something truly eternal." The Overlord stared at the crystals, his 6 eyes reflecting their alien glow. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vexthara the Dominion didn't know what to do. The silence that followed Sarah's words stretched across the chamber like a held breath. Vexthara remained on his knees, his massive form trembling as he stared at the glowing crystals. Around him, the council members watched in stunned fascination as the most feared being in the galaxy struggled with a choice that no amount of power could make for him. "You speak of evolution," Vexthara finally said, his voice hoarse and uncertain. "But what you're describing sounds like extinction. The death of everything I am, everything I've built?" Sarah's form had stabilized into something that was neither fully human nor entirely other. Her features held an alien grace that suggested vast spaces and ancient wisdom, but her eyes remained recognizably kind in a way that transcended species. "Is that what you think evolution is?" she asked gently. "The complete erasure of what came before?" She moved closer to the fallen Overlord, her steps leaving no sound on the crystalline floor. The pack speech had changed her in ways that went beyond mere appearance. She now moved with the fluid confidence of a predator who had nothing to prove. "When humans first learned to speak the true tongue," Sarah continued, "we were terrified that we would lose ourselves completely. Captain Torres spent weeks fighting the changes, convinced that accepting the pack's gift meant abandoning her humanity." The data crystals pulsed in response to her words, and suddenly the air above them shimmered. Holographic images began to form, not the crude technological projections that most species used, but living memories pulled directly from the outer dark. The assembled council watched in awe as the story unfolded before them. They saw Captain Rebecca Torres, a woman whose determination burned like a star even as fear threatened to consume her. They witnessed her crew's first encounter with the Fenris Pack, beings that defied description, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that had no names. The pack entities were not the monsters that Federation propaganda had painted them as. They were ancient, yes, and powerful beyond measure. But they were also lonely, carrying the weight of eons spent wandering the void in search of others who could understand their nature. "The Pack Alpha spoke to Captain Torres for 7 days, Sarah narrated as the images played out. "Not with words, but with shared experience. The Alpha showed her the history of the outer dark, the rise and fall of civilizations that had touched the void and been changed by it." Vexthara watched with growing fascination as the holographic Torres learned to see beyond the physical form of her hosts. The pack entities existed in a state of constant transformation, their shapes flowing like liquid starlight as they expressed concepts too complex for fixed forms. She learned that the Fenris Pack wasn't just a group of beings, Sarah continued. They were a living symbol of something greater, the idea that strength comes not from domination, but from unity, from choosing to stand together even when standing alone would be easier. The images shifted, showing the human crew as they gradually adapted to pack communication. It wasn't a smooth process. Several crew members initially rejected the changes, terrified by the way the alien language rewrote their neural pathways. But one by one, They began to understand that they weren't losing their humanity. They were discovering what humanity could become. Evolution doesn't erase the past, Sarah explained, turning back to Vextara. It builds upon it. Captain Torres is still human, still the same woman who led her crew into the unknown. But now she's also something more, a bridge between worlds, a translator of impossible concepts. The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline form chimed with nervous harmonics. But surely there must be a cost. Power such as this cannot be freely given. Sarah's expression grew solemn. You're right. There is a cost. The pact demands absolute honesty, with others and with yourself. You cannot speak the true tongue while harboring lies or self-deception. Every word strips away another layer of pretense until only truth remains. She gestured toward Vextara, who was still struggling with the revelations that the pact speech had forced upon him. The Overlord felt that cost the moment I began to speak. 3,000 years of carefully constructed myths about his own nature, all swept away in minutes. Vextara raised his massive head, his 6 eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and desperate hope. You want me to abandon everything. My empire, my power, my very identity. You ask me to become weak. Do I? Sarah asked, her voice carrying new depths. Or do I offer you the chance to discover what real strength looks like? The holographic images shifted again, showing scenes from deeper in the outer dark. The council members gasped as they witnessed battles that spanned light years, conflicts between forces that made their greatest warships look like toys. But these weren't the chaotic slaughters that marked most galactic conflicts. They were precise, elegant dances where every movement had meaning, where violence itself became a form of communication. The pack fights differently than your empire, Sarah explained. They don't seek to dominate or destroy. They hunt to teach, to test, to help their prey discover strengths they never knew they possessed. Every battle is an opportunity for growth. The images showed Fenris entities engaging with massive space-borne leviathans that dwarfed entire star systems. But instead of simply killing these cosmic whales, the pack members guided them, helped them navigate treacherous dimensional currents, protected them from forces that would have consumed them. This is what the pack offers, Sarah said. Not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to nurture. Not the strength to conquer, but the courage to connect. They hunt not for sport or sustenance, but to find others who might one day join the endless chase across the stars. Vextara struggled to his feet, his massive frame no longer seeming quite so imposing. The pack speech had changed something fundamental in his posture, in the way he carried himself. The aggressive dominance that had defined him for millennia was still there, but now it was tempered by something else, uncertainty, curiosity, and the first stirrings of genuine humility. If I choose this path, he said slowly, if I accept your pack's gift, what happens to my empire? To the billions of beings who serve under my rule? Sarah's smile held both sadness and hope. That depends on what you choose to do with your new understanding. The pact doesn't demand that you abandon your responsibilities, but they do require that you approach them differently. She reached for one of the data crystals, its light growing warmer as it responded to her touch. The choice is still yours, Vextara, but now you know what you're truly choosing between. Vextara stared at the crystal in Sarah's hand for what felt like an eternity. The assembled council members barely dared to breathe as they witnessed the internal war playing out across the Overlord's features. 3,000 years of absolute certainty warred against the new understanding that the pack speech had forced upon him. Show me, he said finally. The words emerging as barely more than a whisper, Sarah nodded and activated the crystal. The holographic display shifted, showing new images that made the previous revelations seem simple by comparison. The council watched as reality itself bent around scenes of transformation, beings from across the galaxy who had accepted the pack's gift and been forever changed. There was a hive mind collective that had once consumed entire solar systems to feed its endless hunger. After contact with the pack, they had learned to nurture growth instead of demanding consumption. Their vast networks now help young civilizations develop sustainably, guiding them away from the mistakes that led to ecological collapse. A warrior race that had glorified death in battle discovered through the pack that true courage lay not in dying well, but in living with purpose. Their culture shifted from one of glorious destruction to one of protective dedication. They became guardians of the weak rather than predators of the strong. Most remarkably, there was an artificial intelligence collective that had sought to impose perfect order on a chaotic universe. The pack taught them that chaos itself was a form of beauty, that the unpredictable dance of free will created symphonies more complex than any calculated harmony. The AI beings learned to celebrate randomness while still providing stability where it was needed. Each transformation was different, Sarah explained as the images flowed past. The pack doesn't force anyone into a predetermined mold. They help each being discover their own potential, their own path to something greater. Vexthara watched with growing wonder as the hologram showed him possible futures. He saw himself not as a conqueror crushing resistance beneath his heel, but as a teacher helping younger species navigate the dangerous passages between the stars. His empire became something unprecedented, a voluntary association where beings chose to follow not because they feared his power, but because they trusted his wisdom. The Silicon Collective's drones began to emit excited harmonics as they processed these new concepts. The efficiency gains would be extraordinary, their spokesperson announced. Willing cooperation produces exponentially better results than forced compliance. But the ethereal representatives were less convinced. What guarantee do we have that this transformation is genuine? Their leader asked, their form rippling with skeptical energy. How do we know this isn't some elaborate deception designed to make us lower our defenses? Sarah turned to face the ethereal delegation, her transformed features reflecting their energy patterns back at them in ways that should have been impossible. You don't, she said simply. Trust can't be proven with sensors or measurements. It has to be earned through action. She gestured toward the crystals, which were now glowing so brightly that they cast strange shadows throughout the chamber. The pack offers knowledge, not certainty. Understanding, not guarantees. They've learned over millions of years that forced peace is no peace at all. Real change has to come from within. The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline form chimed with a complex melody that conveyed deep thoughtfulness. But surely there are those who would refuse such change? Beings who prefer the certainty of power through force? Of course, Sarah replied. The pack doesn't expect everyone to accept their way. They've encountered species that chose isolation over transformation, beings that preferred their familiar darkness to unknown light. The pack respects those choices and moves on. She paused, her expression growing more serious. But they also protect those who do choose change. The outer dark isn't just empty space, it's a sanctuary for beings who want to grow beyond their original limitations. The pack makes sure that those who seek transformation can do so safely. Vexthara had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up with a voice that carried new depth. And what of those who might threaten the transformed ones? Who would seek to drag them back to their former limitations? Sarah's smile held a hint of something that was definitely not human. The pack deals with such threats very efficiently. They're still hunters, after all. They simply hunt different prey now? The holographic display shifted once more, showing glimpses of the pack in action against forces that sought to exploit or destroy the transformed civilizations. These weren't the elegant teaching hunts that they preferred, but something far more primal and deadly. Beings that chose to prey upon the evolved civilizations found themselves facing the full fury of entities that had perfected violence. Across cosmic scales, the pack's protection isn't gentle, Sarah explained. They understand that sometimes growth requires pruning away the parts that would poison the whole. But they never act out of malice or vengeance, only out of necessity to protect what they've helped create. Vexthara straightened to his full height, his massive frame no longer projecting mere physical dominance but something deeper, the presence of a being beginning to understand his own potential. If I accept this gift, he said, if I allow myself to be changed, what would you need from me in return? Nothing, Sarah replied, and the simplicity of her answer sent shockwaves through the chamber. Nothing? The Silicon Collective spokesperson buzzed with confusion. All exchanges require reciprocal value transfer. Sarah shook her head gently. The pack learned long ago that forced obligation breeds resentment. They offer their gift freely, without strings or hidden costs. The only requirement is that those who accept it use their new understanding wisely. She approached Vexthara, holding out the crystal that contained the complete linguistic matrix. The Overlord stared at it, understanding that this small object represented the most momentous choice of his extremely long life. The transformation isn't instantaneous, Sarah warned. It takes time to fully integrate the pack's language, to understand all the concepts it contains. You'll go through periods of confusion, moments when you question everything you thought you knew about yourself and the universe. Vexthara reached out with one massive hand, his claws stopping just short of touching the crystal. And if I decide partway through that I've made a mistake? If I want to go back to what I was? Sarah's expression grew infinitely sad. That's the only thing the pack can't give you, the option to unlearn what you've learned. Once you truly understand what real strength looks like, you can never again be satisfied with the hollow victory of domination through fear. The Overlord's hand trembled as he contemplated the magnitude of what he was considering. Around the chamber, the assembled delegates waited in breathless silence for his decision, understanding that this moment would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The moment stretched like a bridge between two different universes, one where power came from the barrel of a weapon, and another where it flowed from understanding and connection. Vexthara's hand hovered over the crystal, every eye in the chamber fixed upon this simple gesture that would change everything. Finally, with a movement that seemed to echo across dimensions, the Overlord closed his fingers around the glowing crystal dot. The change was immediate and overwhelming. Light erupted from the point of contact. Not the harsh brilliance of a star going nova, but something gentler and infinitely more complex. The crystal dissolved into pure energy that flowed up Vexthara's arm and into his consciousness. Carrying with it the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of pack history, the assembled council members watched in awe and terror as Vexthara's massive form began to convulse. His 6 eyes blazed with light as new neural pathways formed in his brain, creating connections that had never existed before in his species. The pack speech wasn't just entering his mind, it was rebuilding it from the ground up, integrating concepts that required entirely new ways of thinking. "It hurts," he gasped, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate with sympathetic resonance. "I know," Sarah said gently, moving to stand beside the transforming Overlord. "The first integration is always the hardest. You're not just learning a new language, you're discovering new dimensions of thought itself." Through the pain, Vexthara began to experience fragments of pack memory. He saw the vast hunting grounds of the outer dark, felt the joy of running alongside beings whose thoughts moved at the speed of light. He experienced the profound satisfaction of teaching a young species to navigate its first dimensional gateway, the bittersweet beauty of watching civilizations choose their own paths to growth most powerfully. He felt what it meant to be part of something larger than individual ambition. The pack's collective consciousness didn't erase individual identity. Instead, it created a harmony where each voice remained distinct while contributing to a greater symphony. The transformation lasted for hours, though time seemed to flow strangely in the chamber. The other council members found themselves unable to leave, drawn by forces they couldn't understand to witness this unprecedented moment. They watched as Vexthara's physical form began to shift, his obsidian skin taking on new textures that reflected light in impossible ways. When the process finally stabilized, the being that stood before them was recognizably Vexthara, but fundamentally changed. He retained his impressive size and alien majesty, but the aura of menace that had once surrounded him was gone. In its place was something far more powerful, the presence of a being who understood his place in the cosmic order. "I can hear them," he said, his voice now carrying the patient wisdom of geological time. "The pack, they're welcoming me home. Sarah smiled, and for a moment her human appearance reasserted itself completely. How does it feel? Vexthara's 6 eyes focused on her with new understanding. Terrifying, wonderful, like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having. He paused, testing his new perception. I can see the connections now. The threads that bind all conscious beings together. How did I miss something so obvious for so long? Because you weren't ready to see it, Sarah replied. The pact taught us that revelation can't be forced. Understanding has to grow naturally, like a flower reaching toward sunlight. The ethereal representatives rippled with nervous energy. What does this mean for your empire? For the billions who serve under your rule? Vexthara turned to address them, and the delegation collectively stepped back. Not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming presence of a being who had touched something cosmic and been forever changed. It means everything changes, he said simply. But not through force or decree? I can't compel my subjects to follow this path. The pact speech has made that impossible. Real transformation has to be chosen freely. He gestured, and the air around him shimmered with new possibilities. I'll return to my empire and share what I've learned. Some will listen, some won't. Those who are ready for change will find opportunities to grow. Those who aren't will be free to make their own choices. The Silicon Collective spokesperson buzzed with computational confusion. But this will result in massive inefficiencies, reduced control parameters, potential system fragmentation. Yes, Vexthara agreed, and his voice carried a note of profound peace. It will be messy and complicated and sometimes frustrating. It will also be beautiful beyond anything I could have imagined when I ruled through fear. Sarah activated another crystal, and the chamber filled with new images, glimpses of possible futures spreading out like ripples from this moment. The council members saw Vexthara's empire transformed into something unprecedented, a voluntary confederation of species working together not because they were forced to, but because they chose to be part of something greater. Some worlds rejected the change, choosing to maintain their independence. Others embraced it completely, sending their best minds to learn the pact speech and join the growing network of transformed civilizations. A few tried to exploit the transition period for their own gain, only to discover that the pact's protection was very real and very decisive. The transformation won't be complete in our lifetimes, Sarah explained as the images flowed past. True evolution takes generations. But the process has begun, and it can't be stopped now. The Zephyrium ambassador's form chimed with complex harmonies. And what of those who would threaten this new order? Who see opportunity in the chaos of change? Vexthara's expression grew serious, and for a moment something of his old ferocity flickered in his transformed features. The pact doesn't tolerate those who would prey upon the vulnerable during times of transition. They've given me new ways to protect what matters, methods that make my old approach look like a child's tantrum. He demonstrated by speaking a single word in the pact tongue. The sound made reality ripple around him, and suddenly every being in the chamber could feel the vast presence of the Fenris pack focusing its attention on their small gathering. It lasted only a moment, but the message was unmistakable. Those who chose growth were not defenseless. The old galaxy is ending, Vexthara announced, his voice carrying the finality of cosmic law. In its place, something new is being born. The choice facing every species, every civilization, every individual being is simple: evolve or be left behind. He turned to Sarah, his 6 eyes reflecting depths that hadn't existed hours before. Thank you for showing me the way home. Sarah nodded, her own transformation beginning to reverse as the immediate crisis passed. The pack sends their welcome, young hunter. Your real journey is just beginning. 6 months after the transformation in the council chamber, the galaxy was already unrecognizable. News of Vexthara's change had spread like wildfire through communication networks, sparking everything from revolutionary uprisings to philosophical Renaissance movements. The universe was learning that evolution was possible, and that knowledge was reshaping civilization itself. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the Wandering Star. watching as Captain Torres guided their ship through the luminous corridors of the outer dark, the journey that had begun 3 years ago with a desperate exploration mission had become something far greater. A bridge between worlds that grew stronger with each passing day. Incoming transmission from the former Dominion territories, Torres announced, her voice carrying the complex harmonics that marked her as pack-touched. It's Vexthara himself. The holographic display activated, revealing the transformed Overlord in his new role. Where once he had sat upon a throne designed to intimidate, he now stood in a simple chamber surrounded by representatives from dozens of species. They weren't there as conquered subjects or fearful supplicants, but as partners in an unprecedented experiment in voluntary cooperation. Sarah, Vexthara's voice carried warmth that would have been impossible before his transformation. I wanted to share the latest developments with our pack sister. The display shifted to show scenes from across his former empire. On the mining world of Zarian Prime, former slaves were working alongside their previous overseers to develop sustainable extraction methods. The change hadn't been smooth. Decades of oppression couldn't be erased overnight, but the pack speech had given them tools for communication that transcended old grievances. It's remarkable, Vexthara continued, when beings can truly understand each other, when they can share their deepest motivations and fears, most conflicts simply dissolve. Not all, he added honestly, but enough to make real progress possible. Sarah smiled as she watched images of former enemies learning to work together. The pack always said that most violence comes from misunderstanding. When you can speak directly to someone's deepest self, it's hard to maintain hatred. The transmission showed other developments as well. The Zephyrian Empire had formally requested teachers to help their citizens learn the pack speech. Several Silicon Collective nodes had volunteered for transformation experiments, curious to see how artificial intelligence might evolve when touched by cosmic perspective. Even some ethereal dominions were cautiously exploring the possibility of change, but the most significant development was happening in the spaces between established territories. New communities were forming, mixed populations of transformed beings from different species, who had chosen to build something entirely unprecedented. These settlements existed partially in normal space and partially in the dimensional currents of the outer dark, creating environments where the normal limitations of physics were more like suggestions. The pack elders are calling it the Great Flowering, Vexthara explained. A time when consciousness itself evolves beyond its original boundaries. They say it happens only once every few million years, when conditions are exactly right for widespread transformation. Torres looked up from her navigation console, her eyes reflecting the strange light of dimensional space. The pack told us something similar. They've been waiting for this moment longer than our species has existed. They knew that eventually consciousness would reach a point where it could choose its own evolution. Sarah moved closer to the display, studying the faces of beings who had chosen transformation. Each one was different, some barely changed from their original form, others so altered that their species was difficult to identify. But all shared a quality that transcended physical appearance, a sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. What about resistance? Sarah asked. Not everyone will welcome these changes? Vexthara's expression grew serious. You're right. Several systems have declared themselves transformation-free zones. The hegemony of Keth has threatened to destroy any ship carrying pack-touched individuals. The corporate syndicate is spreading propaganda claiming that the pack speech is a form of mental infection. The display showed footage of the resistance movements. Some were driven by genuine fear of change, others by those who profited from the old systems of oppression and exploitation. A few were motivated by philosophical objections to consciousness modification, which the pack respected even if they disagreed. How are you handling them? Torres asked. Carefully, Vexthara replied. The pack speech makes it impossible to use their old methods of forced compliance. Instead, we're trying something new, patient demonstration. We show them what voluntary cooperation can achieve and let them decide if they want to participate. The transmission showed examples of this approach in action. When the resistance movements attacked Pac Dutch settlements, the response wasn't overwhelming retaliation but precise defense followed by offers of dialogue. Former enemies were invited to see the transformed communities firsthand. To witness what cooperation could build, some attackers were convinced. Many weren't. But the mere possibility of change was spreading, creating cracks in the foundations of the old order. The most interesting development, Vextara continued, is happening in the neutral zones. Independent traders and explorers are seeking out Pac-Touch teachers, not because they want to join any empire or alliance, but because they're curious about personal transformation. The Pac's gift is spreading organically person by person, choice by choice. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction watching these developments unfold. When she had walked into that council chamber 6 months ago, she had hoped to prevent a war. Instead, she had helped spark something far more profound, a voluntary revolution in what it meant to be conscious. The transmission included a final surprise, a message from Earth itself. Humanity's homeworld had become an unexpected pilgrimage destination for beings seeking transformation. The planet that other species had dismissed as insignificant was now recognized as the birthplace of the Pac Alliance. The world that had proven consciousness could evolve beyond its original limitations. The irony isn't lost on us, Vextara said with something that might have been humor. The species I once planned to conquer is now teaching the galaxy what real strength looks like. As the transmission ended, Sarah stood quietly on the observation deck, watching the strange beauty of the outer dark flow past. The Pac entities moved through these dimensional currents like living poetry, their forms shifting and flowing in ways that conventional physics couldn't explain. "Where do we go from here?" Torres asked. Joining her at the viewing port, Sarah's smile held the patient wisdom of beings who had learned to think in cosmic timescales. Wherever the Pac needs us next. There are still billions of conscious beings in the galaxy who don't know that evolution is possible. Our job is to show them, one choice at a time. In the depths of space around them, the Fenris Pack continued their eternal hunt, not for prey to devour, but for consciousness ready to grow beyond its original boundaries. And across the galaxy, beings were beginning to understand that the greatest adventure of all was the journey toward becoming more than what they had ever imagined possible, the cosmic overlord who had once ridiculed a human. Girl was now learning to hunt among the stars, chasing possibilities instead of conquests. And in the language of the killer wolves from the outer dark, such transformation had a simple name: coming home.